I want to move over to New Brunswick, though, where today a snap provincial election was called. Here is some reaction first from the opposition. Take a listen.
New Brunswickers are in the election they do not want nor need. Despite the Liberal Party's repeated and sincere offers to ensure a stable path well into 2021, Blaine Higgs chose to send New Brunswickers to the polls in the middle of a pandemic. The Premier of New Brunswick chose political opportunism instead of the health and safety of our citizens.
That is the leader of the Liberal Party in that province, Kevin Vickers, reacting to the election call. You heard him there. He's calling it political opportunism. New Brunswick will head to the polls on September 14th, making it Canada's first major election in the pandemic. It comes after the New Brunswick Liberals walked away from all party negotiations on a proposal from Progressive Conservative leader Blaine Higgs to keep his government in power until October of 2022, or when the pandemic is declared over, whichever came first. Higgs says the government needs stability in order to effectively respond to the COVID-19 pandemic. And because the negotiations broke down, an election is needed. Let's get more on exactly what Mr. Higgs has to say. He joins us now from Fredericton to discuss. Hi there. Nice to see you again, Mr. Higgs. I guess I can't. Can I call you Premier, or has the election been declared? So I have to say I can't. I have to talk to you in your capacity as leader of the party. Oh, I can't hear you. Unfortunately, the audio I don't think is working. Is that an issue? Sorry, control room, can I check with you? Is there audio coming? Mr. Higgs, can you hear me okay?
There, Vashi, yes.
Okay, I hear you now. Thank you, sir. Thanks for your patience, and my apologies for the technical difficulties.
No problem.
Let's start off with this election call. You heard, Mr. Vickers, there, your opponents say that you really kind of created a false dichotomy or a false construct. Either agree to keep your party in power for another 2 years, or you have to call an election. Did you call this election because you made a political calculation that a majority was in reach?
Well, certainly, Vashi, I mean, the consideration of the timing of the election is important. So I guess looking at that and the reality of that is twofold. One, you could say, yes, is this a time to get a majority? But the other is, are we at a time now that we can manage an election during COVID in our province? And certainly with our control of COVID, with all the cases tracked and are travel related, we feel it was a safe time to do that, as we're doing so many other things with COVID now. However, my attempt last week, in order to continue what the COVID committee was doing, but only to expand it into other areas like the economy and health and education, to have a path forward that built longer than any one government's mandate. That was my goal last week, and that was my goal leading up to an election call, because that was my preference. But unfortunately, this talk about, well, we wouldn't call to the end of the year. It's like that could be our COVID committee or situation could be much, much worse in the country. But right now, we're in a safe zone that we feel that we can do this. Public health feels we can do it. And we're doing so many other things, working and living with COVID.
But here's, I guess, what I'm getting at. The idea that this Friday was the deadline for other parties to either come to the table and agree to what you were looking for, or there would be an election. That was really, wasn't that just an arbitrary deadline that you came up with? Why not negotiate with them longer in order to avoid having to go to the polls?
What I wanted to decide by Friday of last week was whether there was a genuine interest in order to proceed or not. And there was an interest from two parties. But it turned out there wasn't from the opposition. They didn't even show up in the afternoon Friday. So we were prepared. We went late Thursday night. We were prepared to go into Friday night, Saturday, Sunday. We didn't rule out anything. But I needed to know by Friday afternoon that we actually had a willingness to develop a path forward for our province in many areas, because I'm not prepared just to sit around and wait for a vaccine. I want to move the province forward. I want to have us put the province first in many areas. And I've been railing on about politics and politics as usual ever since I got into this process 10 years ago. So unfortunately, the opposition didn't even show in the afternoon, didn't even come back. So that helped me conclude the fact that there was no genuine interest in having a plan going forward that would last until the pandemic was over. So that meant that any time, and it could be in its worst condition, I couldn't trust the opposition to basically say, well, they wouldn't call it if they thought the time was right. So I had the opportunity to make the decision, and I made it.
Let me ask you, though, is that true? And I'm thinking from the perspective of the Liberals. I think about, extrapolate this to the federal scene. If Justin Trudeau went to the opposition and said, guys, look, we need to steer this country in the right direction. Do you mind agreeing to keeping me in power for another couple of years? Let's keep things status quo so that we do the right thing for the country. I'm pretty sure that the opposition right away would say that's handing the Prime Minister and Justin Trudeau too much power. And that's in essence what the Liberals were arguing on Friday before they left, that this was handing you too much power. Can you understand that position?
Well, in putting in the simplicity of how you've just said it, I absolutely agree with that evaluation. However, that is not the agreement that was being struck. The agreement was being struck was very much a continuation of our COVID cabinet committee, only branched into other areas. And the idea was that we've had success with working together in this other group. We're dealing with the pandemic. Can we have that same singular focus on other important issues that are affecting our province? That's what I was asking for. It wasn't how it would work. It wasn't, do we have absolute agreement? We would have to work out the details. But you know, when it's a no-show, walking away, it's pretty obvious that there isn't going to be any sustainable path forward for the best interest of the province. So I had a choice to make. Would I just kind of sit around and wait for the vaccine? I'm not wasting my time here in government by just waiting for something to happen. I want to make things happen for this province, and I feel that we've been doing that. And we were working together previously, but it was apparent that yes, if we're talking about COVID, that's fine, but we're not prepared to talk about anything else. And that's not good enough. We have other issues in this province that need to be looked at, and we need to move forward, and that's what I'm doing. I
take your point, certainly, Mr. Higgs. I just wonder if, you know, it was just Friday afternoon, if you had waited a couple more days, or why all of a sudden you decided this is it. If they're not at the table this afternoon, that means that we need an election. And you know what they are saying, what your critics in the opposition are saying, that it's because you know a majority is within reach. This was your intention all along, and it's political opportunism.
Well, it wasn't my intention all along. Yes, I know that right now the majority, you could say, well, maybe it's within reach, but that was not my intention all along. My intention was, can we work together with a path forward? That was my goal. We had very meaningful discussions, and I think the leaders of the other parties have actually, confirmed that. But when a party just chooses not to show up, and I get a call about 3:45 when there's a news cast that's already planned for 4 o'clock, and we haven't seen them, it's like, okay, so who do you trust here? So in any case, I made the decision that I couldn't have a deal. I would have worked the whole weekend. We even talked about doing that. So it seemed like the genuine nature of making something for a long time, let's say, path for our province that goes beyond the election cycle, it wasn't in the cards. That wasn't an agenda the Liberals wanted to pursue, because they have one pursuit of an agenda, and that was, how do we take the government out eventually?
When did you make the decision that you were going to go ahead with calling the election?
Oh, not till, actually it would have been probably last night. Yeah, last evening.
Sorry, you said last night? Pardon me, someone was just talking in my
Sunday evening, yes.
Sunday evening. And a quick question for you just about the way that now the campaign will proceed, because I think there's a lot of interest right across the country about how this is going to work during a pandemic. I heard your press conference earlier. My understanding is once it starts, once the campaign is underway, if there is an outbreak or, a so-called second wave and it does, really spread in New Brunswick, let's say, and I know you've had great success so far, but let's just say that there isn't really a way to stop things in their tracks. So what kind of contingency plans, if any, do you have if that ends up being the case?
Well, firstly, actually, I wouldn't be going down this road if I wasn't very confident in our health authorities, our public health, our health officials, and what we've done to date. How quickly we contact trace, how quickly we shut down, a spread, and we haven't had any community spread of any kind. So I wouldn't be going into this if I thought there was going to be an outbreak that would be connected. I mean, we could have an outbreak, but that doesn't mean it's connected to the election campaign, because we're going to do that very differently. No door-to-door, no handouts left on doorsteps, no big gatherings. It's following all of the public health rules, which public health have given to our elections to Brunswick. So elections to Brunswick have an obligation to follow those rules, the same as we're doing for shopping, for whatever we're doing in going to restaurants. We're doing it today with COVID, so there really isn't any difference here. I'm sure Elections Canada or Elections to Brunswick can do that as well. So that idea is pretty straightforward, I think, in relation to we'll follow the rules. We will be campaigning much differently than we ever did, just as we're doing so many more online meetings or interviews or connections. We're going to do that same thing across the province. It is going to be not campaign as usual for sure. And so I'm not concerned about an outbreak that's related to the campaign. If we have an outbreak, it would be the same as any other. How do we deal with it? Is it localized? Do we contact trace it? I'm sure we will find the appropriate method to ensure that everyone is safe during any sort of outbreak we have here in our province.
Okay, I'll leave it there. I'm sure we'll check in with you again during the campaign. Thanks for your time this evening, Mr. Higgs. Appreciate it as always.
You're very welcome, Vashi.
Progressive Conservative leader Blaine Higgs joining us from Fredericton. Hi, I'm Vashi Capellos, host of Power in Politics. See more of our show by subscribing to the CBC News channel or click the link for another video.